Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about functions. I'm mostly going to talk about notation, but I'll also help you figure out what a function is. So let's start with that notation. We're going to do a lot of algebra problems with this, so pay close attention. Often when you see function notation, it will look like this. Not always, but often. The key thing to know is whatever's in front of the parentheses is just the function's name. So this is telling you, if you're looking at a graph or a table, you're working with the function named f. Whatever's in the parentheses, and it may look like a variety of things, but whatever is in that parentheses is the input, or what you're plugging in the function. Okay, so it could look like a variety of things. It could be f of x. G of x would be almost the same thing, except the name of the function is g that you're dealing with. Input still x. It could also be g of 2. What that means is g is your function, and 2 is your input. It could be smiley face of x. All that means is x is your input, and you're plugging in the function named smiley face. It could be smiley face of a, which would mean a is the input into the smiley face function. Okay, that's all the notation is. You pronounce it f of x. Whatever's in parentheses as your input is the most important piece of information here. Okay, when you say f of x, you're telling me that the equation is a function. So if you look at number 3, when we say f of x equals x minus 2 squared minus 6, oftentimes you've seen that before as y equals x minus 2 squared minus 6. That means almost the same thing. It's just different notation. Okay, so saying f of x is really like saying y equals. Okay. The only difference is it's telling you it's a function, and it defines it in terms of its input. I keep saying that because it's extremely important. Okay? Whereas y just tells you y, f of x tells you what the input is. Okay. So what is a function, and how is it different than just like your standard equation? There's lots of equations in this world, but only certain ones are functions. So let me give you a quick example. Let's say I asked you to find f of 2 for this equation. What that means is f is the function we're dealing with, which tells us to use this equation. And 2 is the input, which is what you plug in for the function. So it was f of x. I replaced the x with a 2. So I'm going to take that 2 and replace it with x in the equation. So it's 2 minus 2 squared minus 6. Hopefully you realize 2 minus 2 is 0, which 0 squared is still 0. And you get negative 6. Okay. A function is something that when I plug in an input, it gives me exactly one output. So I could say that f of 2 equals negative 6. Okay. You will never plug in 2 to this function and get something else. Like I can never plug in 2 and get 13 as an output or negative 100 as an output. It only maps to one specific y coordinate. That's the definition of a function, is for every input, there is one unique output. So I should even write that down. So for every input, there's one unique output. There's an either. You can put that in your own words, but that's my abbreviated version. Okay, so both of these figures over here are also functions, and I'll show you why. Inputs in the table are x, outputs are f of x. It's also kind of like an xy table. For any of my inputs, it only maps to one output. So 0 only goes to 2. It doesn't also go to like 0, 3, right? That's not in the table. That would map to 2 different things, so it would not be a function. 9 only goes to negative 1. 5 only goes to 3. For every input, there's one unique output. Same thing with the graph. Let's say x equals 2 to kind of keep up this theme going of x being 2. On the x-axis, I'm going to find 2. And I note that that point is 2, 0, which means its corresponding y value is 0. Okay, it doesn't also have a point where x is 2 and y is like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's say this point was also on the graph that was 2, negative 10. Then it wouldn't be a function because 2 would have 2 different y values, which would not give it a unique output. But since that point is not actually on the graph, it is a function. Okay, if you have questions about that, let me know, but that's kind of a side point for now. What I really want to talk about is the notation. Okay, so I kind of already talked about this. What does f of 2 mean? It means when x is 2, what is the output, or what is the y value? So this is asking what is the output, what is the output, or what is the y value? If we're talking about an xy plane, the output is always the y value. And I actually already solved this for some of them. So f of 2, the output was -6 for number 3. And I did it for the graph as well. So when x was 2, the y value was 0. The only one I didn't do it for is the table. So let's take a look at this. If the x value is 2, what is the corresponding output or y value? It would be 7. So that's how you would answer that question. Whereas this one would say, find x such that f of x equals -5. It's just saying, like, what does x equal when our y value is -5, when our output or y value is -5. So in this case, we're going backwards for the table. So let's find our y value, or f of x, where it equals -5, and go backwards. The answer would be -6. Okay, or on a graph, I want my y value to be -5. So here's -5, but here's -5, here's -5, right? These all have a y value of -5. So everywhere on that horizontal line has a y value of -5. Now the two that are actually on the graph are here and here. This point is 1, -5. This point is -2, -5. So that one actually has two answers. X would either be 1 or -2. Okay, and that's okay. We can have two different x values, okay, that go to same y value, just can't work the other way. Like, you can't have one input giving you two outputs. I like to think about like a vending machine. If you put $1 in and then you press the function like F5, you should only get out Skittles. You shouldn't put that $1 in and get out Skittles and Reese's. Okay, but it's okay to work the other way. Like, the Skittles and the Reese's can both cost $1. Hopefully that makes some sense. Again, the main point is notation, but if you have questions, let me know. Now for number 3, it's saying if f of x is -5, what would the x value be? And if you're solving for x, you're solving an equation. So if we know f of x is -5, I'm going to substitute that in for f of x in the equation. And it would look something like this. What was it? X minus 2 squared minus 6. And if you wanted to know the corresponding x value, you would solve this equation. Since that's not really the point of the video, I'm not going to go through that. But if you want to try and solve it, feel free. Okay, all I want you to understand is the notation, though, is whatever's in parentheses, the input, and then, you can solve for the output. And then that f of x is kind of like saying y equals. Important points from this video. Okay, to give you kind of a challenge, it doesn't have to be a number as your input. It can be anything as an input. The key is whatever's in parentheses is what you plug into the function. So what f of a means is you're going to take a and plug it into f. So where x used to be, a is now going to be. So it would look like this. A minus 2 squared minus 6. Doesn't matter what it looks like, it's still an input. Even if it's x plus 2. Okay, this is in the parentheses, so that's the input into f. So I'm going to take x plus 2 and plug it in for f. So anywhere you saw an x before was the input, now it's x plus 2. So anywhere you see an x, you're going to substitute an x plus 2. So it looks something like this. Where the x was is now x plus 2. Everything else stays exactly the same. And for an extra challenge, it says f of x plus 2 over f of a. Well, that just says take whatever f of x plus 2 is, which is this, and divide it by whatever f of a is, which is this. So I don't have a lot of room. I'm going to sketch it over here. F of x plus 2 would be this long, ugly looking thing. Just because it looks ugly doesn't mean it's, super complicated. It looks complicated, but like it's the same idea is what I'm trying to say. So you're just going to divide whatever f of x plus 2 is by f of a. Okay, it's ugly. I recognize that. But again, all you did was here's the input, plug it into the function it tells you plug into. Okay, so we talked a little bit about what is a function, but the main thing I want you to understand from this video is what does this notation mean? And this is the key point that we're going to be practicing is to be able to discuss functions, you have to talk the language, okay? Otherwise, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask and have a good rest of your night.